You are listening to Lighthearted, the official podcast of the United States Lighthouse Society. My name is Jeremy D'Entremont. Welcome. Today is May 25th, 2025, and this is another episode of Lighthearted Light. Today we're going to revisit a conversation that was first heard back in June 2020. The subject is Mount Desert Rock in Maine, a tiny island more than 20 miles from the nearest port. The Rock, or MDR as it's known, is home to a historic lighthouse, and it's also home to a research center operated by the College of the Atlantic in Bar Harbor. Sean Todd serves as part of the marine science faculty at College of the Atlantic, and he believes strongly in placing students in the field environment to provide the best possible experiential education. Sean is also the director of Allied Whale, the college's marine mammal research program. Mount Desert Rock, with its Lite station that began service in 1830, has been the property of the College of the Atlantic since 1998. It's a fully operational research station, and the Keeper's House has accommodations for 20 students. Sean Todd also acts as a professional guide, including many seasons in the Antarctic, as well as the Canadian subarctic and Arctic. He created, wrote, and starred in the award-winning Life in the World's Oceans, a 30-part DVD series available from thegreatcourses.com. Let's listen to my conversation with Sean Todd now. What led you to a career as a marine mammal researcher?
Visits to my grandma at the seaside, which coincided on weekends that Jacques Cousteau, The Underseas World of Jacques Cousteau was playing on television. My grandma was the first one to get a color TV in the family. And as a result of that, I got to see spectacular, beautiful, amazing underwater images of what the world was like under the sea. And, then just sort of playing those things out on the beach the day after. Just this wonderful sense of freedom and love for the ocean that has never really gone away. And of course, I guess marine mammals represent the quintessential organism that comes from the ocean. They're spectacular, they're large, they have characters, they have personalities, very much the same way that dogs do. It's not a hard job to love. I love what I do.
So what makes MDR a good place for the observation of marine mammals?
As I like to say to my classes, if you are a 50-foot whale with a 15-foot mouth that has to shift multiple tons of water per gulp, with a 2 to 3 ton tongue that has to press that water out of your mouth every time you take a gulp of food. When you do take a gulp of food, it better be worth it. So, whales, the distribution of whales is quite deliberate. They tend to go to places where there is lots of food. So it's traditionally, it has been in the past, let's say, traditionally an amazing place to go see whales. And that's the reason why the college got involved with Mount Desert Rock very early on. Even when we didn't own the island, working there by permission of the Coast Guard, it just meant that rather than have to do the 2.5-hour steam every day to get out to start work, we could instead live on the island, step off the island onto a Zodiac, and literally be right in the middle of large concentrations of whales. And of course, because there's a light tower there, if it was too rough to go out, we could still go up in the tower and do very, very useful and important data collection just by watching the whales at a distance.
Who is typically out there and what takes place there?
We like to say we are College of the Atlantic. We're not College by the Atlantic. We are of the Atlantic. And the primary mission of the college is to investigate issues of human ecology, which is essentially the art and science of investigating humans' relationship to the world and to each other. That means the kinds of students we tend to attract to the island tend to have a science focus because they're interested in marine research. But they don't have to. I've had fantastic artists go out there and develop amazing portfolios. I've had sound artists go out there, do soundscapes and recordings. I've had musicians go out there. I've had writers go out there simply for the inspiration, just to write something. So it does attract a pretty broad demographic of different students that go out there. My position at the college is endowed as a chair. and part of the discretionary funds I have tries to minimize any barrier for any student going out there. So, a student will go out there essentially for free, and the quid pro quo there is that while they're out on the island pursuing their own studies, supervised by myself and other faculty, they will also engage in running the station. And that in itself is a hugely valuable thing to be able to put in your resume. So, they not only do they know how to do the science, but they know how to live 25 miles offshore. They know how to operate the island. They understand the ecological footprint. As you know, there is no fresh water out there. We have to bring all our fresh water in. We have to bring in our own electricity because there's no cables under the water there. So we have to generate our own electricity through solar panels and generators and so on. We have to manage our own waste. It's a rock, so you can't dig a hole in the ground. So we have to manage our own waste in that sense as well. So both human and food waste. So you are very, very aware of your ecological footprint. And if something goes wrong, you can't simply phone up Brown's Appliance and ask them to come and fix it, right? So you have to be handy. You have to, know what to do with power tools. Managing an island like this, of course, we're in this sort of constant cycle of repair. A student that comes away from that is someone that not only has the science smarts, but also has the initiative and the skills to be living in, you wouldn't think so, but actually a fairly extreme environment. It's offshore and you're away from all these things. When a student graduates from the Rock and they ask for a reference, and they almost instantly qualify for one because the people that come out of there are just so superb. We have fantastic students. I always write in my references, living at Mount Desert Rock, the conditions are best described as primitive, and you need physical, mental, and social stamina to survive out there. And the person that comes out of that is quite an extraordinary graduate, and they go on to some amazing things.
And of course, another factor is storms out there. And I know, for instance, Hurricane Bill did a lot of damage there in 2009, including destroying the classroom building, which was actually under construction when I was out there in 2002.
Yes.
And I'm wondering what your personal experience might be with major storms out there.
My experience is they're getting more violent. We used to enjoy fairly welcome hiatuses between storms, but they seem to be coming closer and closer together these days. And I have no data to back that up, except it's just a gut feeling. Mm-hmm. Certainly, we haven't had anything like Bill lately. He says, touching wood as close as he can. Bill was absolutely devastating to us. And the remarkable thing about Bill was, if you were on shore at the time, it didn't appear to be that spectacular. Now, that said, tragically, 2 people did lose their lives because they were just, they were wave watching and they were too close to the cliffs. But it wasn't, it wasn't this kind of like tiles flying horizontally or shingles flying horizontally through the air type thing. It was just swell. The hurricane was way offshore when it came past us. Now, that said, that swell was probably at least 30 to 40 feet high. We know that because when we got back to the building after the damages and we looked at the buildings, we found the high tide mark at the top of the first floor ceiling of the main house. So, that's how far the water was getting up. We knew the hurricane was coming, so we had prepared the house. We had boarded everything up. Those boards worked in the sense that when we got back to the island, we found the front door about 20 foot away inside the house in the kitchen with the board still attached. So the board protected the door, but it didn't protect the door frame. So, and then we know there's accounts in logbooks that when the storms get bad, the keeper would go and his family would go to the Lite tower because the tower is this thick granite. And that's where we would have to have been because, it must have been absolutely astonishing to see this. I just remember landing on the island and the feeling was so somber. just the sheer devastation. To see the entire contents of the house spilled out all over the island, wood everywhere, timber everywhere, wreckage everywhere. 5-ton rocks moved 300 meters in a different direction. Just the power of the storm must have been absolutely incredible. But there were tears that day, because it's a labor of love, and so many of us invest so much time in this place without compensation because we love the place, and to see it devastated like that was absolutely terrible. And it was, we were definitely pretty depressed about it for a long time. Luckily, we managed to turn that around, and now the rock I don't think has ever looked better. But at the time, it was horrible.
I remember talking to John Baxter, who was a Coast Guard keeper there in the early 60s, and he was there for, I think it was Hurricane Daisy in 1962.
That's another one. Yeah.
And he talked about taking refuge in the tower, and he said it was extremely scary, and it did quite a bit of damage to the buildings there in 62.
Right, because hindsight, you made it. But at the time, you wonder, are the waves going to get any bigger?
The maintenance is never ending, of course, in a place like that.
It's like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. Once you've done it, you start again.
The upkeep must be extremely expensive.
It's a money pit. It's a money pit that we love, so we continue to throw money into it.
So obviously you feel it's worth the burden and expense.
The educational benefits we get out of this island and the research benefits we get out of the island right now totally outweigh whatever we put into it. So it's absolutely worth it. And the rock has become somewhat iconic to the college. It's sort of representative of what the college is. It's representative of the time that the college is no longer in. The rock was probably most iconic to the college back in the 70s and the 80s when the college was first starting. Back then, the college had a strong reputation in marine mammal science. But of course, the college does so many fantastic, wonderful things beyond whales. And it's really only fair that those other things get some of the limelight too. But I would still say that marine sciences is something that the college does really, really well. The best way to understand the ocean, right, is to be on the ocean, right? It's not something you look at through a TV screen. You need to be out there in the movement of the water and the spray in your face and the cold seeping into your bones. I'm making it sound miserable, but I love this stuff. I love it. And it's just part of who I am, and it will always be part of who I am. I can't imagine ever living anywhere other than on a coastline.
So I'm wondering, when you're out there and, in these historic light station buildings, do you sometimes think about what life was like for those light keepers and families on the rock who were out there year round? For a long time, it's hard to imagine, but that was a family light station. Kids grew up on the rock and they lived there all year. Do you think about what it was like for those people?
All the time. All the time, for a number of reasons. First of all, as spectacularly severe weather as we see, can you imagine being out there in the winter? And we've actually sent students out there in the wintertime, and they've come back just absolutely exhilarated by the sheer power of nature that they've seen out there. But I think one of the main reasons why I think about them is because they figured out how to do it. And, bizarrely enough, there seems to be this period of time, and I can't quite work out when it was, a time of mechanization or electronics or whatever, that we chose to do things differently for a time. And, those things fail. Electrics, and I always say electrics and salt water mix incredibly well once, and then they don't work anymore. And then, you've got to go back to the old ways. So increasingly, when we think about these problems, we've often gone back to the idea, well, how did they do it? A case in point, how do you land a bunch of equipment on the shore in heavy swell conditions? Right now, for us, if there's heavy swell, because we're reliant on bringing our supplies out on the Osprey, which is our new research vessel, and then tendering it across on a Zodiac and going through the very hairy landing a Zodiac on those boat rails. I think you've done that, so you know what that's about. What they did was they swung a boom out from the cove to a boat that was just outside the surf zone, safely there holding position. they connect it to a cargo net, and then they swing the boom back inshore with all the cargo on board. I mean, no one gets wet. I mean, it's just such a sane system. And so, more than once I've been there on the boat ramp in my rubbers, just waiting to literally catch the next Zodiac coming in, thinking, what I wouldn't give for a boom right now. How much easier would this be if we could just do it that way, right? So things like that constantly. Water collection. Every time I drag up another 5-gallon water jug, thinking, well, wouldn't it be great to have that roof water collection system working again? Now, there's reasons we can't do that, but gosh, they really did have it. They figured it out. And the cool thing about that, just to finish this, is that when I first got here, there was this gentleman there, local gentleman, his name was Wilbur York.
Yes.
And Wilbur was, with his sister, you may even have pictures of them, were children on Mount Desert Rock.
Yeah, I've seen pictures, yeah.
Yeah, in the early 20th century. Of course, I met him in his 80s or his 90s. A terrific guy, an amazing character. And we got involved with him because he wanted to come back to the Rock, and we were only too happy to host him. So we landed him back on the Rock so he could see the place of his childhood.
You were quoted in one article as saying that there are all kinds of little folklore stories connected with the Rock. Would you care to tell us a couple of those?
Well, at the risk of scaring any future students who want to come to the Rock is supposedly haunted.
Of course.
And of course, it's a lighthouse, right? Of course it's going to be haunted. And there are various legends behind that. There's a fisherman who drowned just offshore of the island. The island is quite rich fishing as well, so we have plenty of lobster boats going out there. And apparently a gentleman was found having snagged into his gear and being pulled over by his gear. And so the story goes that there are ghosts, and I've talked with people who have lived on the island that they all have their ghost stories that they can go to. I've lived on the island a bit, and at the risk of sounding kind of glib, I will say that if there are ghosts on Mount Desert Rock, they're happy ghosts. I've never had anything but very, very positive feelings when I'm on the Rock, and a sort of a feeling of adventure and excitement. Now, that said, my students claim there is one bedroom that if you're assigned that bedroom, that apparently you have extremely vivid dreams, let us say. And they all claim it's the room. But actually, some students actually volunteer to go in that room. So, there you go. That's the way it is. But like I said, personally, I've never had anything but really sort of very happy feelings about the place.
Have you slept in that room?
Yeah, I have. Didn't have any problems. Didn't have any problems with it at all. But there you go. Now, I will say this, though. Again, if it's pitch fog out there, and boy, can it get foggy out there. And that's really interesting, because in the days of the old Lite, in the fog, you got this, instead of the flashing beam, you'd see the actual 5 beams coming out, rotating around in this circle. Very, very spooky. And, combination of this, the sounds of the gulls, the seals. If you forgot something on the top floor of the Lite Tower, you have to go, they're up there at 11 o'clock at night. That it takes a little bit of nerve. It takes a little bit of nerve.
I would say so. I was out there in 2002 on a sunny day, but I'll never forget it. I mean, the place is incredible. It's really like being on another planet. It's just a world unto itself, and describing it in the fog like that at night, it's got to be incredible. But I'm wondering if there are any other memorable sights or events that stand out in your mind, things you've experienced out there that really stand out.
I think getting Wilbur on board the island.
Mm-hmm.
Did you hear what I just say? Getting him on board. See, I treat it like a ship. So getting him on board the island was an incredibly important experience. Getting the island back up to scratch after Bill was hugely important. Anytime I take a class out there, and we're out there for 2-3 weeks, I just bond so well with my students, and I'm so proud of them. They become crew. and they become incredibly reliable. The last class I had out there, I had 7 women that were just, I don't know whether I can say this in your podcast, but I will say it. They were kick-ass. I mean, they were just incredible. And, I apologize if you have to bleep the word.
It's a G-rated podcast, but kick-ass was the name of a movie, so I think we can get away with it.
We could use it. Okay. I mean, they were just extraordinary. I mean, they were amazing. They totally rose the challenge. There were some students in that group that I was thinking, well, this might be a bit challenging for them, but they all made it. They did an incredible job. I have this wonderful, vivid memory of a mola, which is an ocean sunfish.
Yes.
About 600 pounds, washing up on the beach of Mount Desert Rock because we had a big storm that day. And we tried to rescue it, but the surf was too high. And eventually it died. And then we decided we were going to cut it up and do a necropsy, do sort of like an educational exercise with it. And, these 7 girls around the mola lifting this thing up, this 700-pound fish, just extraordinary. And the teamwork it required to do that. And they were working as a team. I was just so, so proud of them. And then, and particularly those 3 weeks, the starscapes we had were just incredible. So, it brings out the science in you, but it also brings out the human and the artist in you. Just the beauty, the sheer beauty of the island is amazing. And the starscapes were just breathtaking. You just didn't want to go to bed. You just wanted to keep looking at the stars.
What do you think students take away from the experience of the time they spend on the rock?
A better version of themselves, kind of like 2.0. They learn what they can do. They learn what they're capable of. When I first got to the college, I was a huge fan, and I still am a huge fan, of sending students out on sail training vessels for the very, very same reason. You're put in this environment. It's a very close environment. It's a very challenging environment, physically, mentally, socially, very challenging. And you come out thinking like you can move the world, and you can, because I deeply believe that anyone can do that. And I think the same thing happens on our islands. It's the same kind of transformative experience. A better version of yourself comes out of this understanding a little bit more about who you are, what you need and what you don't need to survive, and what you are capable of. It's no coincidence to me that some of our strongest graduates from the Rock go on to some of the most extreme environments there are on this planet. So, for example, I do a lot of work in the Antarctic on an annual basis, and I'm now working side by side with some of the very students who have graduated from the Rock. I am going to claim absolutely no part in their success. They caused their success, but the Rock facilitated that. So we have students now driving, well, not students anymore, alumni, driving Zodiacs around 80-foot icebergs because of what they've learned to do on Mount Desert Rock.
That kind of leads into, I have one more question for you for bonus points. And that relates a little bit to what you just said. But you've spent a lot of time in some really amazing places like Antarctica and Newfoundland. What is special for you about the Maine coast, and more specifically, Mount Desert Rock?
I guess I've always been attracted to places that have not been manicured by humans. The sheer wildness of the area. One could make an argument there's no such thing as wilderness on this planet anymore. There is not a place on this planet that humans have not touched in some way, either through climate or through pollution or whatever. But I tend to go to these places that are wild. And for me, the coast of Maine is that. It actually feels a lot like Newfoundland to me. If you've read my biography, I was, and as you can hear in my voice, I was born and raised in London in the UK. So very much an urbanite. The minute I got to Newfoundland, I discovered where I should have been for the past 20 years of my life. And I just instantly identified and discovered what I truly loved about this planet. That sort of that interface between ocean and land, and the wildness of the cliffs just felt like home to me. And the Rock and the coast of Maine where I live is very, very similar in that regard. It's the complete wildness. And this idea that, sorry, I'm going to get a little poetic on you, but just being able to sit on a cliff and look out and maybe just see a whale tail or see a whale blow is just so magical. And then to think about the ocean that is just constantly churning, constantly moving, and the sheer mass and the sheer energy in the ocean, and being at sea level, essentially, on the rock, 25 miles offshore, so you can see the full impact of what the ocean is capable of. There's just nothing like it.
It is really a pleasure to talk to you today. And
this has been a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The passion you have for what you do is inspirational. It's magical. And I can't tell you what a pleasure it is to talk to you. So again, thank you so much, Sean. It's
Jeremy,
really
thank you.
Out of more than 300 interviews I've done on this podcast, the one with Sean Todd is one of my favorites. It makes me wish I was one of his students at College of the Atlantic. I was fortunate enough to visit Mount Desert Rock back in 2002 with some of the faculty and students, and it was one of my peak lighthouse experiences. You're way out of sight of land, and it feels like a real wild and unspoiled place with the constant sound of the ocean, the gulls, and the seals. What College of the Atlantic has done with the rock and Great Duck Island, which they also own, is one of the best examples of creative reuse of a historic light station. I believe it's really perfect. We will be back with a new episode next week. Be sure to check out uslhs.org to learn about everything the U.S. Lighthouse Society does, including preservation grants, tours, the research catalog, and much more. For now, to all our regular listeners and our new ones, thanks so much for listening, and keep a good light.